The auctioneer's voice cut through the January cold like a chainsaw through frozen oak. Sold, 240 acres, northeast quarter second to the bank. Final bid, $11,400 per acre. Tom Reichert stood in the back of the auction tent, hands shoved deep in his Carhartt pockets, watching strangers raise paddles for land his grandfather cleared in 1947. The same land Tom used as collateral 3 years earlier. The same land the dealer warned him about. 3 times. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the Massey Ferguson 9S.415 parked outside the tent, still wearing mud from last fall's harvest. 410 horsepower, 12-row corn head, the most powerful combine his family ever owned. It performed exactly as promised. The economy didn't. And now half his grandfather's legacy was hammered down to a feed company from Iowa, while Tom stood there trying to figure out how a man makes all the right mechanical decisions and still loses everything that matters. The meeting that should have stopped it. It was March 2020 when Tom walked into Hebron Implement with a number in his head and a plan that sounded bulletproof. "I want the 9S415, he said. "Full package, 12-row head, extended warranty. I can custom cut 4,000 acres on top of my own 600. That's $35 per acre gross. Even at 3,500 acres, that's $122,000 side income annually. The payment's $78,000. I'm covered." Dennis Kovar, the dealer principal, was 61 years old and had sold more Massey Ferguson iron than any man in 3 counties. He'd seen this movie before. "Tom, you're 39 years old. You run 600 acres corn and beans. You've never owned a machine worth more than $95,000. This combine is $410,000 before the head. You're financing $440,000 total. I know the numbers. Do you know what happens when corn drops below $4? It won't." Dennis leaned back in his chair. He wasn't angry. He was tired. "I've been doing this 34 years. Every time someone walks in here with a custom harvesting plan, they believe the work will be there forever. It never is. Guys find other cutters. Guys buy their own equipment. Guys go broke. You're betting on strangers to make your payment." "I'm betting on horsepower and efficiency," Tom said. "That 9S cuts 20% faster than anything else in the county. I'll have customers lined up." Dennis pulled a sheet of paper from his desk drawer. It was a blank financial worksheet. "Show me what happens if you only get 2,000 custom acres." Tom didn't touch the paper. "I'll get more than that." "Show me what happens if corn hits 360. That's worst-case panic talk." "Tom, I'm not trying to kill your dream. I'm trying to make sure you're still farming in 5 years. Tom stood up. "Are you selling me the combine or not?" Dennis looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll draw up the paperwork." 2 weeks later, Dennis drove to Tom's farm, unannounced. Tom was in the shop, rebuilding a planter row unit. He saw the dealer's truck pull into the gravel lot and immediately felt his jaw tighten. Dennis got out slowly, hands in his jacket pockets. "Tom, I need 5 minutes. I already signed." "I know, that's why I'm here." They stood in the cold shop while a space heater rattled in the corner. "I talked to your lender," Dennis said. "I know you're using the northeast quarter as collateral. That's your best ground. That's 240 acres your grandfather bought in 1947. I'm aware. If this deal goes bad, you lose that land. Not money, land. You understand that?" Tom's voice went flat. "The deal's not going bad." "Tom, I've sold equipment to your family for 20 years. Your dad bought his first Massey from me in 2003. I respect you, but I'm telling you, this payment structure is too aggressive for your operation size. You're 1 bad year away from trouble." "Then I won't have a bad year." Dennis exhaled slowly. He wasn't going to win this. "All right, I tried." He got halfway to his truck before Tom called out, "Dennis, why are you trying so hard to talk me out of this?" The dealer turned around. "Because I don't want to be the guy who sold you the machine that cost you your legacy." 3 weeks later, Dennis made one final attempt. The combine was already built. It was sitting in the dealer lot in Hebron, gleaming red and silver under the spring sun. Tom had driven over to see it before delivery. Dennis met him in the lot. "Last chance, Tom. I can unwind this deal. I've got 2 other buyers. You walk away clean, no penalties." Tom stared at the 9S415 like a man looking at a weapon he was about to carry into battle. "I'm not walking away." "Tom, You warned me 3 times. I heard you. But I also know what I'm capable of. I know this market, and I know that machine will perform. Dennis handed him the keys. Then I hope you're right. Tom took the keys. He climbed into the cab. He fired up Ford 10 horsepower of AGCO power engine and felt the entire frame hum beneath him. He was right about the machine. He just didn't know the market was about to prove Dennis right about everything else. Year 1. The plan works. Fall 2020 was the kind of harvest season that makes a man feel invincible. Tom cut his own 600 acres in 9 days. The 9S.415 ran like a freight train through 200-bushel corn, the 12-row head swallowing rows faster than anything else in Thayer County. He didn't have a single mechanical issue. Not one. Then the custom calls started coming in. First job, 840 acres for a retired farmer outside Deschler. $35 and $4 gross. Second job, 1,100 acres for a corporation farm near Bruning. $35 per acre, $38,500 gross. Third job, 660 acres for an elderly widow who couldn't physically run equipment anymore. $37 per acre, $24,420 gross. By the time the corn was gone, Tom had custom harvested 680 acres and grossed $131,180 in outside income. After fuel, labor, and maintenance, he cleared $87,000. The combine payment was $78,400 annually. He made it. First year, covered. His wife Emily met him in the shop the night he finished his last custom job. She'd been skeptical from the beginning, but she hadn't fought him. She'd just watched. "You did it," she said quietly. Tom pulled off his gloves and tossed them on the workbench. "Told you." "Dennis still thinks you're gambling. Dennis doesn't run my farm." Emily looked at the combine parked in the shed, lit by a single overhead bulb. "That thing scares me." "Why?" "Because it owns us now. Every year, every payment. We don't own it. It owns us." Tom kissed her forehead. "One more year like this, and we're bulletproof." But the universe doesn't care about bulletproof plans. Year 2, the first crack. Corn prices started slipping in June 2021. It wasn't a crash. It was a slow, grinding decline that felt like watching blood seep through a bandage. $5.80 in January, $5.40 in March, $5.10 in May. By July, corn was trading at $4.70, and Tom's crop revenue projections were starting to look sick. His 600 acres weren't going to gross what he'd forecasted. He'd built his budget around $5.50 corn. Now he was looking at a 15% revenue drop on his own production. That meant the custom income wasn't extra anymore. It was essential. Tom started making calls in August, lining up work for fall. He called every contact from the previous year. He posted in regional farm groups. He even ran an ad in the Hebron Journal-Register. By mid-September, he had commitments for 2,100 custom acres, less than half of what he'd cut the year before. "Why?" he asked one farmer who'd hired him in 2020. "We bought our own combine," the man said, "used 2015 case. Got it for $160,000 at auction. We're running it ourselves now." Tom felt something cold move through his chest. "You were happy with my work." "We were, but we can't justify paying $35 an acre when we can own the equipment." Tom cut his own 600 acres first. Then he hit the custom jobs. The 9S415 performed flawlessly. Again, it cut fast, it threshed clean, it didn't break down. But 2,100 custom acres at $35 per acre was $73,500 gross. After expenses, Tom cleared $46,000. The combine payment was still $78,400. He was $32,400 short. He pulled the difference from his operating line. His lender didn't say much. They just extended the credit and adjusted his terms. But Tom saw the look in the loan officer's eyes. It was the same look Dennis had 3 years earlier. Emily didn't say anything when he told her. She just stared at the kitchen table for a long time. "What's the plan?" she finally asked. "We hit it harder next year. More aggressive marketing. I'll undercut other custom cutters if I have to. $32 per acre instead of $35. I'll make up the margin in volume." "Tom, you can't control who buys equipment. I can control how hard I work." Emily stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Massey Ferguson sat in the equipment yard, covered in dust and corn chaff. "That machine is eating us alive," she said. "That machine is the best investment we ever made." "Then why are we losing money?" Tom didn't have an answer for that. Year 3, the collapse. Corn opened 2022 at $5.90. For 3 weeks, Tom breathed easier. Then Russia invaded Ukraine. Fertilizer prices exploded. Diesel hit 5.20 cents per gallon. And by March, the commodity markets were moving like a rabid animal, violent, unpredictable, and completely detached from anything Tom understood. Corn spiked to $7.50 in April. Then it crashed to $5.80 in May. Then back to $6.40 in June. Tom's input costs were up 40%. His operating loan was tapped, and his custom harvesting calendar looked like a ghost town. By August, he had commitments for 1,400 acres. One customer called to cancel in late September. "I'm sorry, Tom. We're cutting our own acres this year. Can't afford to pay out." Another called 2 days later. "We're hiring a guy with a case. He's doing $28 per acre." Tom tried to undercut. "I'll do $27. "Tom, he's already scheduled." He cut his own 600 acres in early October. The 9S.415 ran perfectly, but his yield was down 8% due to late summer drought. His gross revenue per acre dropped from $1,100 to $980. He lost $72,000 in expected income on his own production. Then he hit the custom jobs. 1,180 acres total, $31,860 gross. After costs, he cleared $18,000. The combine payment was $78,400. He was $60,400 short. He sat in his pickup outside the bank in Hebron, staring at his phone. He had 3 voicemails from his lender. He hadn't returned any of them. Finally, he went inside. The loan officer's name was Brad Yost. He was 47 years old, and he'd been farming before he went into banking. He knew the margins, he knew the risk, and he knew what was coming. "Tom, we need to talk about restructuring. I can make it work. You're $60,000 behind on a $440,000 note. Your operating line is maxed. Your crop revenue is down. You're not making the payment. Next year will be better." Brad slid a piece of paper across the desk. "This is a repayment proposal. We extend the term, reduce the annual payment to $64,000, but you subordinate the northeast quarter as additional collateral." Tom stared at the paper. "That land is already collateral. Now it's primary collateral. If you miss 2 consecutive payments, we can accelerate the note and force liquidation." "You're saying you'll take the land. I'm saying we need security." Tom stood up. "I'll figure it out." "Tom, sit down." He didn't. "I'll make the payment." Brad's voice went quiet. "How?" Tom didn't answer. He walked out of the bank, got in his truck, and drove home. He sold 80 acres in November. It was ground on the south end of the farm, less productive but still worth $10,800 per acre. He grossed $864,000. After taxes and fees, he cleared $702,000. He paid off the entire combine note. He owned the Massey Ferguson 9S.415 free and clear. And he just sold land his grandfather had owned for 76 years. Emily cried when he told her. Not loud, just silent tears while she stood at the kitchen sink. "We didn't have a choice," Tom said. "We had a choice 3 years ago. I made the best decision I could." She turned to look at him. "Did you, or did you make the decision you wanted?" Year 4, the breaking point. Spring 2023 was wet. Tom got his corn in late. Half his beans didn't get planted until June 10th. His input costs were still brutal. Diesel was $4.80. His operating line was restructured but still tight, and his custom harvesting business was dead. He got 2 calls all summer. Total custom commitment, 420 acres. He ran the numbers in July. Even if he cut those 420 acres at $35 per acre, he'd gross $14,700. After costs, maybe $8,000 profit. That wouldn't even cover maintenance and insurance on the combine. His own 520 acres, after selling the 80, were projected to gross $468,000 at $900 per acre average revenue. But his total operating costs were $387,000. He was going to net $81,000 on the year. His living expenses were $68,000. That left $13,000 margin. One bad breakdown, one hospital bill, one anything, and he was underwater again. In September, a sensor array failed on the Massey Ferguson. It wasn't catastrophic, just a wiring harness issue in the grain tank monitoring system. But it cascaded into the yield monitor, then into the header hydraulics. The dealer sent a tech out. It took 3 days to diagnose, another 4 days to get parts, another 2 days to install and calibrate, 9 days down during peak harvest. The repair cost $14,600. Tom stared at the invoice in the cab of his pickup, hands shaking. He called Emily. I need to sell more ground. Silence on the other end. Then how much? The northeast quarter. Tom, no. We don't have another option. That's Grandpa's land. That's the home place. I know. Then don't do this. Emily, I'm out of moves. She hung up. Tom sat in his truck for 20 minutes, staring at the repair invoice. He thought about calling Dennis. He thought about calling his father-in-law. He thought about calling the banker and asking for another extension. But he already knew what they'd all say. The same thing they'd said 3 years ago. He drove into town and parked outside the real estate office. He sat there for another 10 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, staring at the glass door with the Century 21 logo on it. Finally, he shut off the truck and went inside. The agent's name was Carol Hinrichs. She'd sold land in Thayer County for 30 years. She knew every section, every owner, every family story. She also knew the Reichert Northeast Quarter. Tom, she said when he walked in, what can I do for you? He sat down across from her desk. I need to list 240 acres. Her face didn't change, but her eyes softened. The home place? Yeah. She didn't ask why. She just pulled out a listing agreement and started filling it in. Current market's soft, she said, but that's premium ground. Black dirt, flat, fully tiled. You'll get interest. What's it worth? $11,000 to $12,000 per acre. Maybe more if we get competitive bidding. Tom did the math in his head. At $11,500 per acre, that was $2,760,000 gross. After taxes, fees, and paying off the remaining operating debt, he'd clear enough to stabilize. Enough to keep farming. But it meant losing half of what his grandfather built. Carol slid the paperwork across the desk. You sure about this? Tom picked up the pen. No. He signed it anyway. The calls he couldn't make. Emily found out 2 days later. She didn't find out from Tom. She found out from her sister, who'd heard it from a friend at the co-op, who'd heard it from Carol's assistant. She walked into the shop where Tom was changing oil on the planter. You listed the land. He didn't look up. Yeah. Without telling me. I told you I was going to. You told me you were thinking about it. You didn't tell me you did it. Tom set down the oil filter and wiped his hands on a rag. What do you want me to say, Emily? We're out of options. I either sell the land or we lose the whole operation. We wouldn't be in this position if you'd listened 3 years ago. I made the best call I could with the information I had. No, you made the call you wanted to make, and you ignored everyone who told you it was a mistake. Tom's voice went hard. That combine performed exactly like it was supposed to. I didn't lose money because the machine failed. I lost money because the economy collapsed. You lost money because you bet everything on a plan that depended on things you couldn't control. Every farmer in this county is betting on things they can't control. That's what farming is. Emily stared at him for a long moment. Dennis warned you 3 times, and you didn't listen. Dennis sold me the combine because you wouldn't walk away. Tom threw the rag on the workbench. What do you want from me, Emily? You want me to say I was wrong? Fine. I was wrong. I should have bought a smaller machine. I should have kept the custom work small. I should have listened to the dealer and the banker and everyone else who thought they knew better than me. Is that what you want to hear? She didn't answer. She just walked out of the shop. Tom didn't talk to Dennis for 3 weeks after listing the land. But Dennis called him. I heard, Dennis said. I'm sorry. Tom sat in his truck, parked in an empty field, staring at nothing. It is what it is. Tom, I know you don't want to hear this, but you're not the first guy this happened to, and you won't be the last. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to remind you that you're not alone. Tom exhaled slowly. I keep thinking about what you said 3 years ago, about not wanting to be the guy who sold me the machine that cost me my legacy. Dennis was quiet for a moment. I meant that. Then why'd you sell it to me? Because you were going to buy it no matter what I said, and if I didn't sell it to you, someone else would have. At least I tried to warn you. Tom closed his eyes. You think I'm an idiot. No, I think you're a farmer who made a bet that didn't pay off. That's not the same thing. The auction was held on January 14th, 2024. Tom wasn't required to be there, but he went anyway. He stood in the back of the heated tent, surrounded by 200 strangers, watching a man in a cowboy hat sell his family's legacy in 2-minute increments. Next up, 240 acres, northeast quarter section, Thayer County. Black dirt, excellent tile, currently in corn-sorn soybean rotation. We'll start the bidding at $9,000 per acre. Hands went up. 9,200ers. 9,500. Tom watched the numbers climb. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel regret. He felt numb. $11,000, $11,200, $11,400, sold to bidder 47. Final price, $11,400 per acre. The auctioneer hammered it down, 240 acres, gone. Tom walked out of the tent before the next lot started. Outside, the Massey Ferguson 9S.415 was parked near the fence line. He'd driven it over that morning to move some equipment for the auction company. He stood next to it for a long time, hands in his pockets, breath fogging in the frozen air. The combine looked perfect, clean, powerful, ready. It did everything it was supposed to do, and it cost him everything anyway. A voice came from behind him. "Hell of a machine." Tom turned. It was an older man, maybe 70, wearing a deer cap and a canvas coat. "Yeah," Tom said. "You're the Reichert kid, aren't you?" "I'm Tom Reichert." The man nodded. "I knew your grandfather. Good man, hard worker." Tom didn't say anything. The man looked at the Massey Ferguson. "I heard what happened. Heard you bet big on custom work and it didn't pan out." "That's about right." The man was quiet for a moment. "You know what your grandfather told me once? He said the worst decisions a farmer ever makes are the ones that sound smart at the time." Tom looked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means you didn't do anything stupid. You did something that made sense. But sense and survival aren't always the same thing." The man tipped his cap and walked back toward the tent. Tom stood there alone, staring at the combine. The aftermath. Tom still farms. He runs 520 acres now. Corn and beans. He owns the Massey Ferguson outright. He cuts his own acres every fall, and the machine still performs flawlessly. He doesn't do custom work anymore. He doesn't talk to Dennis much, but when they see each other at the co-op, Dennis always nods. There's no judgment in it, just understanding. Emily eventually came back. She didn't forgive him, but she didn't leave either. They're still married. They still farm together. But something changed between them that can't be undone. She doesn't ask about the numbers anymore. She doesn't question his decisions. She just watches, and Tom hates that worse than anything. The land is gone. The 240 acres his grandfather cleared in 1947. The ground Tom played on as a kid. The field where his father taught him to run a cultivator. Gone. A feed company from Iowa owns it now. They hired a management firm to farm it. Tom drives past it every time he goes to town. Sometimes he stops on the road and looks at it. The tile lines his grandfather installed in 1983 are still there. The fence posts his father set in 1995 are still standing. The drainage ditch Tom dug with a borrowed track hoe in 2010 still runs clean. But it's not his anymore, and it never will be again. On quiet nights, when the shop is empty and the equipment is parked, Tom sometimes stands in the doorway and stares at the 9S.415. He thinks about the dealer who warned him 3 times. He thinks about the numbers that made perfect sense on paper. He thinks about the difference between a good machine and a good decision. The Massey Ferguson delivered everything it promised. 410 horsepower, 12-row capacity, flawless performance. But it couldn't predict the economy. It couldn't predict the competition. It couldn't predict that custom harvesting income isn't a guarantee, it's a gamble. And Tom bet his grandfather's land on that gamble. He won the machine, he lost the legacy, and no amount of horsepower can bring that back. Dennis Kovar retired in 2025. On his last day at Hebron Implement, he drove out to Tom's farm. Tom was in the field, running the Massey Ferguson through late corn. Dennis parked at the edge and waited. When Tom finally shut down and climbed out of the cab, he saw the dealer standing there. "Didn't expect to see you," Tom said. "I'm retiring. Thought I'd say goodbye." They stood there in the cold November air, 2 men who'd been on opposite sides of a decision neither of them could take back. "You ever regret selling me that combine?" Tom asked. Dennis looked at him. "Every day." "Then why'd you do it?" "Because you were going to buy it somewhere, and at least I tried to stop you." Tom nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, You were right. Doesn't help you now. No, but it helps me know I wasn't crazy for ignoring you. Dennis almost smiled. You weren't crazy. You were just convinced. And sometimes that's worse. He shook Tom's hand and walked back to his truck. Tom watched him drive away, then turned and looked at the Massey Ferguson sitting in the field. It still looked perfect,